is Nicole Bonfiglio.
And welcome to another evening of Record, where we give you the latest in news, sports, and culture at Seattle U. In honor of the Women's March, early this month, tonight we'll be featuring a panel of Seattle protesters to talk about their experiences this year.
But before we get into that, Seattle University recently removed an art piece from the second floor of the Lemieux Library. The piece, called Self-Portrait, was taken down due to sexual harassment allegations against the artist Chuck Close. The university decided that due to the placement of the piece in a high-traffic area and the gravity of the allegations, it would be best to replace the piece entirely. The space now has a mixed media canvas piece by Linda Stojak, which was a gift to the university by John Shirley. Next time you're on the second floor of the library, be sure to check it out.
Spectator reporter Sophia Wells reported on the Seattle University-hosted Hackathon, which took place between January 19th and January 20th. The competition lasted 21 hours and was put on by the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers in partnership with Seattle University. The teams were instructed to create a video game as fast as they could, and senior computer science major Claire Mason and junior electrical engineering major Matthew Horn won the first prize in the hackathon with their game Safeway 2 Infinite.
Congratulations, guys.
Congrats.
We're a day away from the start of homecoming week. Make sure to stop by the Winter Involvement Fair tomorrow in the Student Center, room 130. We'll be there representing the Redhawk Entertainment Network, and filming opens with a green screen for anybody who's interested in auditioning. Additionally, the homecoming kickoff and royalty announcement happen at noon in the Student Center, room 160.
And don't forget to come out to the D1 Improv Show on Wednesday night in Piggott Auditorium at 7 p.m. to start this jam-packed week with some laughs.
Our very own Diego Hyndman here created a recap from last year's Battle of the Bands to get us ready for this year's Battle of the Bands, which is this Thursday, February 1st at 7 p.m. Let's take a look.
And the performers we'll be hearing from again, Quad Talk 2016. The winner of tonight's Battle of the Bands 2016 is Redhawk.
in such a few.
And welcome back to our world of sports. Our SU Athletics had a great week recently, with some of our women's tennis players getting recognized by the Western Athletic Conference. Hannah Giannin, a first-year Redhawk, and her sophomore year teammate, Callie McAllister, were named WAC Doubles Team Players of the Week after beating both South Dakota and Eastern Washington, finishing their first week of the season undefeated in doubles. Over the weekend, the women's tennis team as a whole unfortunately fell to the University of the Pacific and also to the Academy of Art University 6-1. But were able to solidify a win against Cal State Stanislaus 9-0. The men's and women's teams traveled up to Vancouver, British Columbia for a swim meet against Simon Fraser, and our men's team pulled out a 112-89 win, while our women's swimmers lost 125-76. The women's basketball team unfortunately had their 4-game win streak snapped over the weekend in a tough 75-68 loss at Cal State Bakersfield. The Hawks' scoring was led by winger Alexis Montgomery, who recorded 28 points and 8 rebounds. She now has 1,318 career points, placing her at 8th on SU's all-time career scoring list. So big congrats to her. Our men's basketball team faced off against Cal State Bakersfield at Key Arena last Friday and came out with a tough-fought 59-55 win. Center Aaron Menzies finished the game with another stellar performance, recording his 9th career double-double with 16 points and 10 rebounds. The men's basketball Hawks now improved to a 15-8 overall record. It's great to see that. And as the WAC season progresses, keep your eyes open for more games and events, and don't forget about our homecoming mega rally before the men's basketball game this Saturday at Key Arena. The rally will be popping off at 6 p.m. in Key Arena's Coke Corner, and the game tips off soon after at 7 p.m. Now, let's take a look at some of the highlights from the Women's March on January 20th. The march started at our very own Cal Anderson Park and ended at the Seattle Center after an hour and a half of empowering speeches. The highlight reel was created by our very own Haley Hackett and Rania Kaur, featuring music by one of the march attendees, Kelton Basirico, on vocals, and myself on guitar. Enjoy.
Like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion. Like how a single word can make a heart open. I might only have one match, but I can make an explosion. And all those things I didn't say, wrecking balls inside my brain. I will scream them loud tonight. Can you hear my voice this time? This is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song. My power's turned on. Starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else believes. 'Cause I've still got a lot of fight left in me. I might only have one match, but I can make an explosion. This is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song. My power's turned on. Starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else believes. 'Cause I've still got a lot of fight left in me. Now I've still got a lot of fight left in me.
I'm not gonna back down. I'm gonna keep standing up for what's right, but we gotta do it together.
Welcome back. My name is Haley Hackett, and today we'll be chatting with a few Seattle U participants of the Women's March to discuss their experiences and motivations. I'm joined today by Andy Volk, film studies major, Alex Marez, communications major, Maitland Hennessy, strategic communications major, and Dr. Caitlin Carlson, my apologies, a assistant professor in the communications department. How's everyone doing?
Great, glad to be here.
Yeah, thank y'all for coming out. So I wanted to start by asking everyone, what made you go to the Women's March this year? Andy, do you want to start?
Sure.
It could be popcorn style.
I mean, just to support, all my women friends and just in general, just the women movement. I went with a few friends and saw some other friends there, and I went with my girlfriend, and she made a really good point that it's ridiculous to be marching for just like basic women's rights in 2018, and I think just like that statement alone was part of the reason why I was there, just kind of support her and support everyone else that was there.
Absolutely. And Alex, why did you show?
I went because I didn't get to go to the first one last year, and I just kind of went to check it out. I saw so many things on social media, like so many videos, but being there like in person was really cool, and seeing a lot of families there, which was awesome. And yeah, it was just cool to be a part of.
Great. Maitland?
I got to go to the first Women's March, and it was such a powerful experience. One of my favorite parts about the march is that everyone can march for their own reason, but you kind of have united behind this common banner, and you really get to be surrounded by like-minded people and so on who are there kind of willing to listen and support and try to change something.
Dr. Carlson?
I was actually lucky enough to have my mom fly in to march with me, so that was a really cool experience. I also got to do the Women's March last year, and like Maitland said, I think there are lots of folks there for lots of different reasons. For me, the issue of abortion continues to be one of the places where I see the political project of feminism really bumping up against the existing kind of, regulations, and that's a place I would like to see some change and want to make change.
Absolutely. So, Alex and Andy, were you able to go to the march last year as well?
Yeah.
No? Yeah, you were?
Yeah, I was actually there filming it for a class, so that was really interesting to partake in that and have people marching really respond to the camera. And it just felt good to really kind of capture that and bring people together to take photos and videos and stuff like that.
Absolutely, and that was such a historic march at that point. Did y'all notice some of the differences, and even, kind of what you heard from the march from last year? Did you notice any differences from the march last year to this year?
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was really cool this year that didn't really happen last year, because it was so new, people who couldn't physically do the march didn't have a great way to participate, right? When you got to Judkins Park last year, it was so crowded that you really couldn't get in. And I noticed this year, while the attendance might have been slightly lower, there were more people like along the route, right? So like older folks or people with little kids who couldn't actually walk the couple miles, but came out and stood along Pine and cheered and had signs and stuff like that. So I thought kind of the participatory nature was different this year.
Yeah, you felt like it was more inclusive?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were actually talking about this earlier. I think the Women's March in general, with the hats in particular, there were some questions about inclusivity. Do women of color, do trans women, does everybody feel welcome there? So I think there are some places for it to continue to improve, but it did feel like there was hopefully a place for everybody there. Yeah, that it was accessible.
Absolutely. I know one really big hot button topic this year was the broader spectrum of things that people were talking about at this march, and what was trying to be accomplished during this march. Do you guys feel like it limited the amount of people that showed up because of, for example, the pro-choice movement that was kind of being pushed? Or not pushed, but like brought into.
Yeah, I think part of what we're seeing there is also some divides within how do we define feminism, right?
Yeah.
Who gets to call themselves a feminist? At the end of the day, to me, it's about just seeking equal rights for men and women. I think there are a lot of folks, myself included, who feel like, the choice question is essential to that, right? That women can't be equal to men unless we have control over our bodies. So I think that's something we'll continue to wrestle with, but I hope that doesn't prevent people who maybe feel differently from finding their own way to get involved on some of these issues, right? I think one of the things that was so wild was just how much of this is a reaction to the current administration and some of the things that were happening even that week, right? So that was the week we had the shithole comments, and so lots of the signs reflected that. I was lucky enough to actually march with another professor from the communication department, Dr. Malleus, his wife, Dr. Paul's wife, right?
Wow.
So it was kind of interesting for us to just reflect on how some of the media coverage and what's been happening recently, people had really internalized that and wanted to speak out or express themselves on those particular issues.
Absolutely.
I think also what was so unique is that the first march occurred pretty quickly after the election, and it was actually motivated by the election. And so you really noticed that, like, in the first march, it was very motivated by the fact that there was kind of this emotional cloud that was happening. Like, people were coming and people were kind of angry and kind of fearful for what the future of our country would hold, and that was really motivating a lot of the march at the beginning. So coming back this year, there was just this different air where, yes, the administration, like those comments had still just happened, and so some people were marching for that, but a lot more people were coming back with this mindset like, okay, the first time I was marching, I think I was doing it because I was kind of shocked by the election. And now people are coming back and they're marching and trying to find new reasons. Like, okay, what do I really believe? What do I want to support? Like, why am I here this time? And you could definitely feel that, and also try to feel how now we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the momentum of this march and where is this going in the future?
Yeah, one thing I would also add to that is in Seattle, at least, we didn't just have the march, but then we had the day of action. So there were all kinds of activities happening that Sunday for people to get involved, to register to vote, to figure out how to register their neighbors. So I think that is going to be one of the tricky components. And I think what a lot of people are talking about is the midterms in 2018, right? So how do we take the momentum from the march and use that to motivate folks to come out and vote in 2018, to actually make change, right? That it's one thing to kind of show up, or, you know, there's a lot of people who talk about slacktivism, right? With social media, it's so easy to say, oh yeah, of course I support this, but is your butt going to be in a voting booth come, you know, November 2nd?
Yeah, I remember reading an article like right after the first Women's March, and one news reporter had commented, where were these people when we were voting? But it was just like an interesting comment, like, will this movement be the thing that actually changes how people are like coming to the polls?
Well, and quite frankly, it's hard, I think, sometimes to see some of the visuals, right? Like when I was walking and marching with my family and friends, it felt like I wish I could bottle up this feeling, right?
Yeah.
But then when I see some of the coverage, I look and see that's a lot of white women, right? And like white women elected Trump, or white women, you know, are responsible, haven't been the ones out there making the actual difference, if that makes sense. And so I just think this is a really great opportunity for us to negotiate what intersectional feminism looks like. There's a great quote that I always tell people, feminism without intersectionality is just white supremacy, right? So I think there's going to be some figuring out of like, okay, if you're willing to show up for a march, what are you willing to do in the voting booth? What are you willing to do in your own life to just really hopefully pull that thread through for folks?
Definitely, and I think the broader platform is kind of a push for that intersectionality this year. What, based on your experiences with the march this year, what would you like to see in upcoming years at the women's marches?
Well, the first thing that I definitely noticed was the lack of people of color there, especially women of color. I did see like a lot of like Hispanic feminist groups talking about immigration and holding up signs in support of like specific bills and specific legislation that they want to get passed and the things they want to get voted. So they were like kind of pointing to specific issues while also saying like, hey, like, you know, we're women too, like we matter as well. So yeah.
Definitely. What about y'all? Anything you'd like to see in next year's march more?
Maybe just like more cameras, you know. I mean, everyone has a camera on their phone, but I think it's just important to document these things, to really capture what is trying to be achieved and what people are coming together to do, and also just, you know, so many of the signs, people put in a lot of effort to just display their anger, frustration, their hopes and dreams with what this is working towards. So I think just, you know, getting people out there to document it, and more people than just news agencies and reporters, like just people on the street.
Absolutely.
I guess I'm really hoping there will be a little bit of a shift in the social media so that it doesn't just rally right at the point when we're all going to march. I think these are issues that continue beyond one day, and they're issues that will only change if we continue to push and continue to fight and keep doing this every single day. So I'm really hoping that we start creating these social media campaigns that continue and focus on these issues every moment, and people start taking it with them into their lives and careers, and passing it on to others, so that we can start bringing about a real shift rather than just one day where we demonstrate that we care a little.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you guys hit the nail on the head in terms of wanting to see more intersectionality, whether that's women of color, trans women, men, right? That there are a lot of people who I think would benefit from equal rights for women. I think Maitland also touched on this idea of how does showing up for a protest or a march like that translate into political action, right? So if you're willing to show up for a march, are you willing to call your senator? One of the groups that I'm a part of is called Indivisible Washington, and they do things kind of, I think what you're talking about, like every day we'll get 5 actions. Call this person, check out this op-ed. What is it I can do every day to kind of move the needle forward, right? Having people have an opinion about something doesn't necessarily lead to electing officials that are going to pass laws that really make change. And so I would just encourage everybody who was there, everybody who wished they could be there, to kind of continue that through and see what can I take in terms of political action, what can I do to shake things up, because it works, right? If you call your senators, if you write to Congress people, they work for us, right? And I think the Women's March is a nice reminder, right, of we're in charge.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Sorry, we did run out of time. So, we actually have 2 minutes. JK. Well, could you actually tell our audience how to go to that resource where they can kind of make those daily actions?
Right. So the group that I'm actually talking about, if you're familiar, Pantsuit Nation was a secret Facebook group that emerged right around the election for folks who felt like they couldn't come out in support of Hillary on social media because of some of the vitriol they would receive. And so this group is thousands and thousands of primarily women. And as the election happened, it shifted from Pantsuit Nation to Indivisible. So we have an Indivisible Washington chapter. There's Indivisible Seattle. So if you just go to Facebook and check out Indivisible Seattle, you can sign up for the group. It's a closed group. And again, it's a lot of, we mentioned, we were talking earlier about the issue with the pink hats, right? That can be somewhat exclusionary, particularly to trans women, right? And so on that group, we discussed it a lot, right? Or they'll, like I said, have, here's your 5 actions for the day. So, I'm also a big proponent of the League of Women Voters, right? There's lots of resources out there, I think, to try and get folks to the polls to make our government much more representative of who we are, right? There are, I think, 17% or something like that of Congress is female, right? That sucks, right? So it's not surprising when, we've only had 4 Supreme Court justices who are female, that these laws are the way they are. So I really just would encourage folks to push from the march into voting booth, changing who's elected, changing laws.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And make sure to keep on doing those daily actions. So thanks for joining for another installment of Record. Tune in next week to see our coverage of Battle of the Bands and our special interview with the 2nd place winner of the 2017 Albers Business Plan Competition and the founder of Mott Mott Coffee, Brandon Wild. If you are interested in becoming part of the Redhawk Entertainment Network, message us on Facebook, and if you see any newsworthy stories you'd like us to cover, tag us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram using our handle @RecordSeattleU. See you next time.
This is my fight song. Take back my